This video is going to be all about using shading techniques to create values. We're going to use the same paper that we had before and just add on to it. I'm going to go in the upper left corner of my paper and I'm going to draw a little symbol, and this would represent the light source. This could be the sun, this could be a light bulb, it could really be anything that would put out light and create a shadow on our object. Now, if the light is on the left side of our object, it's going to be pushing light toward our object from the left. So our dark shadows are always going to be on the right sides. I'm using the hatching technique, and I'm just once again going back over what I did before using a second layer of hatching. I'm adding a little bit more pressure to my pencil so the lines are darker. Now I'm adding a third layer so I can have 3 good layers of value. Notice how it's lighter on the side near the light source and darker on the side away from the light source. As I'm going around the edge here, I'm using what's called a weighted line to help show the shadow even more. Now this is a cast shadow. That's a shadow that shows up on the ground. So I make the line and I use the hatching technique to create my cast shadow. So now it kind of looks like a ball sitting on the ground maybe. Cross hatching will work the same way. I'm going to have my light source in a similar area. When I start my cross hatching, I'm just going to do a series of those X's or cross marks with pretty heavy pressure on the side away from my light source. So remember, my light is on the left, my shadows are going to be on the right. I made 1 layer of cross hatching. I'm going in with a second layer using just curved lines and a few of those crisscross lines to make it darker. Okay, light on one side, dark on the other. Now for my cast shadow, I always start with that line again. It's touching the bottom of my circle, and then I just use the cross hatching technique to go in and create the cast shadow. And it makes it look a bit more 3D because it looks like it's kind of sitting on the ground or a tabletop making a shadow. When I use my weighted line on the edge, it makes the shadow look even darker and really helps all together. For scumbling, super quick, super simple, because scumbling is an easy technique to do. Just those scribbles, scribble lines, loop-the-loops, circles, anything you want to use, pressing down pretty hard so that the mark is darker all along the far right side, because remember, my light is coming in from the left, my darker shadows are going to be over on the right. Now in each one of these I've done 3 different levels of value. The first level we already made with the texture. The second and third we put on with our technique. The cast shadow for the scribble circle is just a bunch of scribbles laid down so it looks like this object maybe would be 3-dimensional now, like a ball or a sphere sitting on the ground. When I add my weighted line in, I can go around some of the outside edge, so if my lines went over, I could go back over them again. And you could even touch it up more and make parts of it look a little bit darker if you want. It's really up to you, depending on how you want to set up your different circles. Now stippling, this is going to be a little bit different because remember, this is the technique that took a while when we first went through. It's a good technique. Stippling uses lines. Stippling uses dots or dashes to kind of make things darker. So as I'm going through now, I'm going to focus a little bit more on using more dashes than dots. It'll help the technique go faster, plus it'll give me the dark value that I need. Because remember, my light is coming from the left side of my object, so the right side of my object needs to be the darkest. So you can see as I go through this, it takes a little bit of time, but it works out real cool and it gives you a really good value for this technique. For my weighted line, I'm just going to kind of go around and, change my mistakes for sure. For my weighted line, after I get finished doing my stippling, adding the darker values in, I'll just go in and make the line on the right side edge of that circle look a bit darker. You'll see how this works in just a second. Now I'm going in, making that line darker, just drawing back over it with heavy pressure 3-4 times, whatever works for you. It's going to be a little bit different depending on the type of pencils you use. I've got a regular yellow number 2 pencil, they work fine. But if you're using a mechanical pencil or even art pencil, it could be a little bit different. Now my cast shadow is going to work the same, okay? My light is coming from the left side, so it's going to make a shadow on the ground over on the right side. I just start with the line, then I use a stippling technique with my dots or my dashes to go through and make that cast shadow dark. So once again, it settles the object down and make it look like it's sitting on the ground or possibly on a tabletop. Now, the last 2 circles, remember, we use those letters, numbers, or shapes. It doesn't really change much. The technique all stays the same. On the first one, I use those rounded letters, numbers, and shapes. So to make my values darker, I'm just going to repeat that same process. The biggest difference is that I'm going to go through and make sure that these letters, numbers, or shapes that I use are touching each other and that they're overlapping. You know, we can use circles, ovals, loop-de-loops, anything that's rounded on this one. As you add heavier pressure and as you put the objects closer to each other, they're gonna automatically get darker. Now, once again, the light's coming in from the left, so when I make my cast shadow, I want to make sure it's on the right of my object. Then I go in and use that simple rounded letter, number, or shape technique and add in my cast shadow. This will help show the texture, it'll help show the value. And this was kind of tricky because when you add your weighted line in, you probably got some bumpy areas, so just follow over the bumpy areas. That'll make your object look real cool and a little bit more realistic in just a simple way. Last circle. Now this one, once again, is pretty much going to work the same as the first one. We just got to pay attention to the type of letters, numbers, or shapes that we used, okay? These are sharper, these have more corners, and these have more points. So we need to pay attention to that as we go through and we're adding in our dark values. All we want to do is keep adding in those different letters, numbers, or shapes, making them close together, putting them on top of each other. Adding a little bit more heavy pressure with your pencil, that way it'll get a bit darker as you draw each part. Now, light's coming in from the left again, so my cast shadow is going to be ending up on the ground on the right side of my object, okay? Straight line. Now I'm going through and putting in all those jagged shapes, jagged lines, letters, numbers, anything to show it where it's going to be a cast shadow on the ground. The weighted line that's over on the right side for this one is going to work pretty much the same. I want to follow all those jagged points and all those lines with a heavy pressure on my pencil so I can make them look really dark and really increase the shadow on that side of the object. Okay, and now we have it, our finished drawing with texture and value.